Hi, this week we're going to be reviewing chapters 14 and 15 in our Human Resources book. Chapter 14 is about talking about respecting employee rights and managing discipline. Employees have rights, so a right is the ability to engage in conduct that is protected by law or social sanctions and free from interference from another party, such as an employer. The first right an employee has is statutory rights, and this is a right that is protected by specific laws. One of the key protections is the protection from discrimination based on sex, race, religion, national origin, age, handicaps, or other protected statuses under the Act of the Civil Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Another statutory right is the right to have protection from unsafe working conditions, which is monitored by OSHA. And they have a legal right also to form unions and to participate in union activities. The next right an employee has is contractual rights, and this is a right based on the law of contracts. An employment contract spells out explicitly the terms of the employment relationship for both employee and the employer. Only a very small percentage of the workforce works under employment contracts. There are union contracts in which employees can file grievances, in which an employee is allowed due process. And an employee could potentially file a wrongful lawsuit against their employer for a wrongful discharge. This is the termination of an employee for reasons that are either illegal or inappropriate. Other rights can include the right to ethical treatment. So employees expect to be treated fairly and ethically in return for providing their employer with a fair and reasonable amount of work. Human Resources contributes to this by integrating the code of ethics into their employment policies. They have a limited right to privacy, personnel files. Personnel file access should be denied to all people except managers who have a need to know. They have limited rights to free speech. Employers can discipline employees who say something that is damaging about their company or its reputation. Although it is okay to be a whistleblower, which is a legal right under federal and some state laws. So employers also have rights. They have management rights, and these can be summed up as the rights to run the business and to retain any profits that result. And they also have the right to what is called employment at will. And this is a common law rule used by employers to assert the right to end an employment relationship with an employee at any time for any cause. There are 4 workplace issues that are particularly challenging to human resources management teams. The first one being random drug testing. Many employers consider random drug testing to be unreasonable and illegal invasion of privacy. Random drug testing is required by law for certain occupations like pilots, but it has been challenged in some cases where the employer has other methods available to ensure a drug-free work environment. So they will do maybe a drug screen only if there is probable cause. The second challenge to human resources is electronic monitoring, and there can be much theft in today's world, and companies are attempting to fight these various forms of theft by the use of electronic surveillance devices to monitor their employees. This has raised many concerns for employee privacy. The next challenge for an HR team is whistleblowing. This is an employee's disclosure of their employer's illegal, immoral, or illegitimate practices to a person or organizations that may be able to take corrective action. The fourth challenge is restrictions on moonlighting. This is when a person is holding a second job that's outside of the normal working hours. Moonlighting brings with it the need to balance the rights of the employer, who they expect their employees to come to work and to be fully engaged in performing their jobs, with the rights of the employees who expect to be free to use their off-duty time anytime or any way that they want to. The fifth challenge and last challenge is there are restrictions on office romance. The office is an inviting place for romance, How organizations deal with office romances depends on the goals and the cultures of that organization. Some companies frown on it, and some companies feel that it can be beneficial to the organization. Employees need to know their human resource management policies within their company. So the next topic is disciplining an employee. This is a tool that is used by a manager that communicates to an employee that they need to change a certain behavior. This gives the employee an opportunity to basically correct their wrongs. So there is progressive discipline, and this usually works in a series of 3 to 5 steps. They have a verbal warning. They'll initially get a verbal warning, then they'll have a written warning, and then the next step would be a suspension for maybe 3 days, and then the last step would be termination or discharge. And then the next one is positive discipline. And this is a discipline procedure that encourages employers to monitor their own behaviors and assume responsibility for their actions. At my current place of employment, Parkview, we call this a PIP, which is a performance improvement plan. Managers must ensure that employees who are disciplined receive due process. This means fair and consistent treatment, but employees should know the company's policies and procedures. They should have a right to correct their wrongs, and managers must gather information and get all of the facts first to justify the discipline. They also need to be consistent to the rules and violations with no favoritism. So as a manager, you should never lose your temper. You should never avoid discipline because it may harm the relationship with an employee. You can never play a therapist, and you never want to make excuses for an employee. So managers have to deal with difficult employees at times for things like poor attendance, poor performance, insubordination, which this is the refusal of an employee to obey a direct order from a supervisor, or maybe verbally abusing a supervisor. Then there's workplace bullying, which we all know what that is. Then there's alcohol-related misconduct. And sometimes alcoholics are viewed as sympathetically by managers because it is considered a form of a sickness. And then you have illegal drug use and abuse, and this is a very big challenge nowadays in today's society. We can prevent a lot of this discipline in companies if human resource management spends more time on and resources on recruiting and selection. And if they also spend a greater deal of time in training and developing these employees, and human resources planning, and if they have an effective performance appraisal system, and if employees feel that they are being compensated and rewarded fairly by their organization. So basically that was chapter 14. Chapter 15 is about working with organized labor. A union is an organization that represents employees' interest to management on such issues as wages, work hours, and working conditions. A labor relations specialist is someone, often a member of the human resources staff, who is knowledgeable about labor unions and can represent management's interest to a union. The Wagner Act, or the National Labor Relations Act of 1935, is a federal law that's designed to protect employees' rights to form and join unions and to engage in such activities such as strikes, picketing, and collective bargaining. The National Labor Relations Board is an independent federal agency that was created by the Wagner Act to administer state law. Then the Taft-Hartley Act of 1947 is a federal law designed to limit some of the power acquired by unions under the Wagner Act by adjusting the regulation of labor management relations to ensure a level playing field for both parties. And then we have the Landrum-Griffin Act of 1959, and this is a law that was designed to protect union members and their participation in union affairs. Then we have the Railway Labor Act, and this was a law designed to regulate labor relations in the transportation industry. Then you have business unionism, and this is a form of unionism that focuses on improving workers' economic well-being. There are unions that are structured by the types of jobs that they do, such as truck drivers. They are part of what they call a Teamsters union, and that's basically specifically for truck drivers. So under a collective bargaining system, union and management negotiate with each other to develop the work rules under which union members will work for a stipulated period of time, usually 2 or 3 years. Labor contracts, these are contracts that spell out the terms of employment and work rules that affect employees in the unit represented by the union. Union memberships are private sectors that are shrinking, but they are still an important part of the labor relations system. Unions may differ internationally. So what does an organization do if they're unionized? They form a union acceptance strategy. This is a labor relations strategy in which management chooses to view the union as its employees' legitimate representative and accepts collective bargaining as an appropriate mechanism for establishing workplace rules. Management can select a union avoidance strategy if it feels that the union will have a disruptive influence on its employees or fears that it will lose control of its workers to a union. Employees organize and work with the union to form themselves into what they call a cohesive group. And if the union shows it has sufficient employee interest in forming a union, then the National Labor Relations Board will schedule a certification election. The next step after forming a union, they become what they call certified. And then they go to collective bargaining, and then both the employer and the union have the duty to bargain with each other in good faith. They elect a union steward or stewards, and grievances can be filed that will help settle disputes regarding the interpretation of the labor contract. So there are time limits put on grievances for resolution, usually maybe 3 to 4 days. So that's pretty much the summary of Chapter 15 this week, and we've got 2 weeks left, so I guess I will see you next week. Thank you very much.